And now we are going to do our next talk in the drug reviews and therapeutic session. And for this, we have none other than Dr. Vijay Panikkar. And everyone knows Dr. Vijay Panikkar, but it is my proud privilege to introduce him. And he's going to be talking about early use of combinations in diabetes and hypertension with a focus on cilnidipine. So Dr. Vijay Panikkar, as we all know, is in Mumbai, and he's the founder and director of Dr. Panikkar Specialty Care Center located in Dadar and Bandra East. He brings with him years of clinical expertise and training in this field and has successfully managed a comprehensive spectrum of endocrine and diabetes cases over the past 3 decades. He is an active professor of medicine at the KJ Somaiya Medical College, Sion, Mumbai, and he's also an honorary consultant with the Department of Endocrinology, Diabetes and Metabolism at Leelavati Hospital and Guru Nanak Hospital, Bandra, Mumbai. He has many feathers in his cap, many accolades and many awards, and basically he is an extremely popular person and an inimitable style of speaking and a wonderful orator. So over to you, Dr. Vijay Panikkar, sir.
Thank you, Neeta, for a very kind introduction. And I must thank the entire IDEC team for putting up this fantastic program. Can you see my slides?
Yes, sir.
Yes. The topic given to me is early use of combination in diabetes and hypertension, focus on cilnidipine. See, diabetes is a major risk factor. Hypertension is a risk factor for diabetes, and diabetes is a risk factor for hypertension. Uncontrolled hypertension can cause atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease, the whole works, macrovascular disease. Uncontrolled diabetes may cause various macro and macrovascular complications, and hypertension is the second most important cause of chronic kidney disease after diabetes. So both uncontrolled hypertension and diabetes can cause serious cardiovascular complications and many other complications. And then you can think how dangerous this combination will be. Hypertension with diabetes, two deadly diseases out there to damage your patients. Hypertension is twice as common in diabetics. In fact, 50% of diabetics will have hypertension and 50% of hypertensives will have diabetes. New onset of diabetes 2.5 times in hypertension, 20 to 40% of IGT patients have hypertension, up to 75% of type 2 diabetes have hypertension. And 1/4 of hypertension in diabetes is not controlled. I would say more than half are not controlled. And hypertension with diabetes increases the cardiovascular risk threefold. Now, at the time of diagnosis, 50% of diabetics have hypertension. But as the duration of diabetes progresses, that number can go up to over 70%. So hypertension is an integral part of being a type 2 diabetic. Now, when you talk of hypertension and diabetes, they are partners in crime. Type 1 diabetic, hypertension is usually a renoparenchymal in origin. And it is caused by the underlying diabetic nephropathy which develops over a time in type 1 diabetics. They generally don't have hypertension at the time of diagnosis. And this typically manifests when the patient starts presenting with a renal abnormality, which is checked out with a microalbuminuria. As opposed to that, type 2 diabetes is multifactorial, mainly due to insulin resistance as a part of metabolic syndrome. And usually, hypertension can precede the onset of nephropathy and even the onset of diabetes by years or decades. Now, when you talk of the complications, hypertension can affect the brain, hemorrhage, stroke, retinopathy, peripheral vascular disease, renal failure, of course, and cardiovascular morbidity. Now, whenever hypertension is with diabetes, the chances of complications definitely increase. Cardiovascular mortality rate, if you see, yellow is diabetic, the purple is non-diabetic. For every level of hypertension, the diabetic is more prone to cardiovascular risk. Same way with systolic hypertension. These are non-diabetics, but the moment you have diabetes on that same systolic hypertension, the complications practically double. Now, CV risk mortality doubles for every increase of 20 by 10 millimeters of mercury. See this here, 115, 75, 135, 85, double, it goes on increasing, and that is how the BP will cause the problem. So there is substantial evidence that supports the benefits of BP reduction in patients with diabetes to reduce the major macrovascular, microvascular complications of diabetes, as well as mortality and morbidity in diabetic patients. And the proven benefits of BP lowering treatment in diabetes also include significant reduction in the rate of end-stage renal disease, the onset, progression, duration, retinopathy, and albuminuria. So hypertension treatment is very important. Let us look at some of the studies which looked at the diabetic patient. This is the HOT study which looked at bringing down the diastolic blood pressure from 90 to 80. Very significant reduction in major cardiovascular events. Myocardial infarction reduced, CV mortality reduced. But look at this. These are diabetic patients, these are non-diabetic patients. Reduction from 90 to 80 causes a 48% risk reduction. But that doesn't reflect in non-diabetic patients. That tells us that treating hypertension in a diabetic patient is a very rewarding and fruitful result. These are the summarized thing about the HOT study. Major cardiovascular events reduced by 50%, cardiovascular mortality 7%, and stroke 30%. Now, whenever you have a tight hypertension control, the rate of progression of the decline in eGFR is reduced. See, this is your BP of 130 by 85, and this is the GFR reduction per year. As the BP increases, untreated diabetes goes to maximum, telling us that a good hypertension control is mandatory in all diabetics. This is again a study from the UKPDS, which compared tight blood pressure control versus tight glycemic control. And what was the glycemic control? HbA1c around 6. Goal was, the average blood glucose of 108. But tight BP control was just 144 by 82. And look at that, stroke reduced by 44%. Any diabetes endpoint, 24% as opposed to only 12% and 5% in stroke. Diabetes deaths, 32% reduction as compared to 10%, telling us that in a diabetic, treating hypertension is definitely more important. I'm not saying that glycemic control is not important, but the results and the outcome are much, much superior when you have a good blood pressure control, obviously with a good glycemic control. Now, kidney damage and severe risk. So as the kidney damage progresses, normotensive, glomerular filtration rate, kidney failure, as it goes on increasing, the chances of cardiovascular mortality goes on increasing as the GFR comes down. Intensive versus standard BP lowering, all the major guidelines recommend blood pressure target of less than 140 by 90. There is recent evidence that in patients with CKD, lower the BP, the better the outcome. Now, these are some Indian guidelines in 2019. What should be the threshold for starting diabetes treatment? In a diabetic, any BP greater than 140/90 becomes a threshold for treating diabetes. And what should be the goal? 130 by 70 to 80. These are again guidelines from ESH and AHA and ACC. There again in diabetics, it says get it down to below 130 by 80. Why treat early? Data for grade 1 hypertension patient with low to moderate severe risk from 10 RCTs which were analyzed. And all of them, treated patients showed definite benefit. So pharmacological treatment was associated with a significant reduction in coronary artery disease, stroke, cardiovascular outcome, all-cause mortality, and renal failure. Now, what is the problem? Even in the best performing countries, more than half of the hypertensives are never properly controlled. And majority are still treated with monotherapy, which will never be adequate in BP control, especially in diabetics. So combination of BP lowering drugs are required to control BP in most patients with hypertension. Is there any ideal combination for use? Look at these studies. These are so many studies which looked at patients to achieve target BP goal. And if you look at the number of BP medicines, all of them needed at least 2 drugs to control their BP. And why this poor BP control in diabetes? Because there is activation of RRA system, volume overload, sleep apnea associated obesity, vascular damage, and there is a clinical inertia. There is a failure to increase the drug dose. You find somebody's BP is 140, 100, you say, oh, this could be a white coat effect. Let's check it again, let's do it again. And in that process, it goes untreated because the follow-up does not come, and that is where the problem starts. So the goals of management would be lower the BP, which will minimize proteinuria, eGFR decline is slowed, and reduction of progression of CKD and cardiovascular disease. Now, this is the 2020 ISH global guidelines, which says you should start drug therapy with a single pill combination, low dose ACE-ARB with a calcium channel blocker. And choosing the ideal combination therapy for hypertension and its related organ damage, again, a calcium channel blocker with a RASI inhibitor. And that causes a greater reduction in mortality. So what is the recommendation, ESH and ESI? Initial 1 pill combination would be an ACE or ARB with a calcium channel blocker, or an ACE or ARB plus a diuretic or a loop diuretic. Second step is a triple drug combination, is an ACE or ARB with a calcium channel blocker plus diuretic. And third is resistant hypertension, where you may add a spironolactone. But if you have an ACE or ARB on board, be careful about adding a spironolactone because that can cause hyperkalemia. You can use diuretics, alpha blockers, beta blockers. Now, beta blockers should be considered at any step where there is a specific indication for its use. Example, patient with cardiac problems, heart failure, angina, post-MI, atrial fibrillation, or younger patients who are planning pregnancy. That is where the beta blockers would come in a diabetic hypertension. Now, these are the ESC guidelines which says that start early. To achieve BP goal, most patients will require a combination therapy. They are safe, well tolerated, shorter time to target, and longer period of control. So what would be the choice of antihypertension? The first line obviously is an ACE or an ARB. But in this, please watch out for hyperkalemia and hypotension, because patients who are on ACE or ARB, the moment they go into severe hypotension, especially if they have a gastroenteritis or a loose motion or something, they can go into acute kidney injury and acute kidney failure. Second line is calcium channel blocker and diuretic. Third line is beta blockers, alpha blockers, and so on. You should add on combination rather than replace. You don't change one and add another, but you add on. So to simplify the combination therapy, these are the 3 groups: ARB, diuretics, and calcium channel blocker. Now we are going to talk about calcium channel blockers, and there are certain unmet needs. All calcium channel blockers are not renal safe or renoprotective. Most of the calcium channel blockers are short acting or short lasting. And there is a reflex tachycardia as a major side effect. Now there are different types of calcium channels. You have the L-type or long-lasting. L-type currents are long-lasting, slow in activation rate, and are blocked by all the calcium channel blockers. You name them, all of them act on the L-type. They are found in cardiac and vascular tissues, and they're absent in renal tissues. The N-type, that is the neuronal type, currents are found primarily in neurons, where they initiate neurotransmission by releasing norepinephrine from the peripheral sympathetic nerve endings. They are also present in renal tissues. So there is a release of norepinephrine. The T-type, this is transiently activated. This is not very active. T-type currents are transient and they're present in renal tissues. And you have the P or Q type, they are neuronal types of calcium channel blockers recently detected in the arterioles. Now, if you look at the currently available calcium channel blocker, nifedipine, amlodipine, ephedrine, nilotinib, azelastine, benidipine, and cilnidipine. Cilnidipine is the 4th generation calcium channel blocker. They all block the L type. And what does that blockage cause? Decrease in contractility of the heart, actually increase in the heart rate, pulse rate increases, and the glomerular pressure increases. This is what L-type activation causes. Blocking of T-type does very similar thing, but could reduce aldosterone secretion. The N-type reduces the heart rate as opposed to increase. There is no reflex tachycardia. Glomerular pressure is decreased, and that is where the advantage comes in preventing the progression of nephropathy. If you look at all the calcium channel blockers, cilnidipine is the 4th generation. The norepinephrine levels are all increased with the L channel blockage. But with the N channel, there is no change or decrease. Heart rate is increased by all of them, no change. Characteristic rapid action. And now let us look at cilnidipine nephroprotection. What are the studies that we have? This is the antiproteinuric effect of cilnidipine added to an ACE or ARB, and the urinary protein creatinine ratio was suppressed in cilnidipine group, but amlodipine group did not have an effect. Cilnidipine significantly reduces proteinuria unlike amlodipine. Look at this is a 12-month study comparing amlodipine and cilnidipine. With amlodipine, there is an increase in proteinuria. With cilnidipine, there is a decrease. Uric acid is also reduced because this increases the uric acid excretion. Telmisartan is superior to losartan, accepted. But here, this is an Indian study comparing adding cilnidipine to telmisartan versus amlodipine to telmisartan. And they're looking at the percentage of increase in proteinuria from baseline. Cilnidipine and telmisartan and amlodipine and telmisartan, there is an increase. So cilnidipine is beneficial there, mainly because it reduces the intraglomerular pressure. Pedal edema. All calcium channel blockers can cause pedal edema. Amlodipine, 70%. Cilnidipine, 26%. Significant less. So cilnidipine and telmisartan associated get greater suppression of the increase in proteinuria as well as associated with lower incidence of pedal edema. Changes in urinary protein creatinine ratio, antiproteinuric effects are superior in cilnidipine group compared to the amlodipine group. Again, same here, cilnidipine reduces albuminuria. This is an Indian study which was just published this year, 2021. After 6 months, there is a significant reduction in albuminuria. Cardioprotection studies, cilnidipine significantly reduces carotid femoral pulse wave velocity. Now, tachycardia, reflex tachycardia is more with amlodipine, much less with cilnidipine. TDI is a tissue Doppler imaging. Cilnidipine improves left ventricular function in hypertensives. There is surprisingly a beneficial effect of cilnidipine on the lipid profile also. Reduces triglyceride, increases HDL by 5, reduces the VLDL, total cholesterol is also reduced. Now, we have the different calcium channel blockers. What is the comparative data that we have? This is comparing with azelastine. Azelastine is a L and T suppressor. This was published in 2013. The results suggest that cilnidipine is more efficient in reducing albuminuria than azelastine, independent of its blood pressure lowering effect in type 2 diabetic patients with hypertension. This was a study of the new 4 types of calcium channel blockers. They were nifedipine control release, cilnidipine, ephedrine, amlodipine. And what did this study tell us, or did they find? It revealed that only nifedipine control release and cilnidipine could reduce albuminuria statistically. Thus, it was suggested that the 2 calcium channel blockers would be favorable for organ protection in hypertension. Nifedipine control release or the nifedipine retard preparation that we have, not the plain nifedipine. Now, this is again comparison with benidapine. Benidapine is the only calcium channel blocker which blocks L, N, and T. And it has a slightly better reduction in protein excretion. So, urinary protein creatinine ratio significantly decreased in both groups after 3 months of therapy and thereafter. However, the difference between the groups was not significant after 12 months of treatment. And conclusion, the addition of benidapine as well as cilnidipine reduces urinary protein excretion in hypertensive patients with CKD who are already being administered ARBs. This is very important. They work beautifully when they are given in combination with an ARB. So to summarize, blood pressure lowering remains a key objective for treatment of hypertension. There is no question. It is the most rewarding therapeutic option which we have in treating type 2 diabetes. Good blood pressure control, obviously along with a good glycemic control. There is still under detection, under treatment, and suboptimal BP control in India, medical inertia. I have had experiences where there was a patient who had a BP of 150/90. I put him on medication and his family doctor tells the patient, "Arey, tumko blood pressure nahi hai, mat lo goli." This is lack of knowledge and lack of applying what is required. So poor BP control will give you poor clinical outcomes. And the real challenge is to improvise effective, simple, and safe medication. Most people need drug combination, no question about that. Most of your antihypertensives, 90% of your diabetics will need at least 2 drugs, and that would be an ARB and a calcium channel blocker. Combination of ARB and calcium channel blocker is likely to be the best tolerated, most effective, most protective, and the preferred combination for most patients. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, for that very illuminating, clear, and nice talk. I don't see any questions in the chat box, but I would like to ask one question.
Sure.
Considering the all the attributes that have been given to cilnidipine, and you've very nicely shown us the different L type and N type and all of that. Practically speaking, do you think we should change over all our amlodipine patients to cilnidipine?
See, amlodipine is also a good drug. The main thing is, if there is a proteinuria, then you should be shifting over from amlodipine to cilnidipine in combination with an ARB. If there is no proteinuria and his BP is well controlled, his sugars are well controlled, you could continue with amlodipine. There is no problem.
Right.
It's a good drug by itself.
Right.
But cilnidipine definitely has advantages in patients, diabetic patients who have proteinuria.
Right. If patients do not have proteinuria, do you think the BP reduction potential differs with amlodipine and cilnidipine?
It's comparable. It is comparable. It is comparable.
Okay. So, are there any other questions?
But if you ask my personal opinion, I think amlodipine is more potent in BP reduction than cilnidipine, marginally.
Marginally, right.
But that is not saying anything actually.
Yeah. Yes. Anybody has any other questions, Dr. Makkar? Anyone wants to ask? We still have a little bit of time, so that's why.
Just to come back to the diabetes and hypertension, we have not had any concrete kind of recommendations coming in last almost a decade. There have been plus points and minus points, and if you, I don't know whether you listened to George Bakri's last evening, he did a very nice practical talk on how to approach hypertension, and he had a lot to say about azilsartan as one of the important things. And according to him, according to the guideline now that is, there, we should be looking at combination of ARBs or ACE with calcium channel blockers and diuretics. So how frequently you think we should be using, how frequently you need to use this triple drug combination, or you still prefer to use, higher dose of for one drug and then add second dose?
Generally, I do use a telmisartan CCB combination quite frequently. In fact, that would be my top of the line at the moment. Very rarely do I need to use a triple with a diuretic, because in the current scenario, we are already with SGLT2. So you don't need a diuretic push. SGLT2 also brings down the blood pressure to some extent. And in many of the patients I am seeing, I have to reduce the antihypertensives when the patient is on SGLT2. So that is the current scenario in my practice. I have been seeing that I have to reduce the antihypertensives.
So how much is the concern of using diuretic in diabetes patients, particularly the thiazide group?
No, it is not a concern. Where it is required, you definitely use it to bring down the blood pressure. It is the third thing. You have a ARB, you have a calcium channel blocker, you have a diuretic. If with two, the blood pressure is not controlled, you definitely add on a third. There is no question about that. It is definitely a part of the armamentarium.
Thank you. Thank you very much, sir, for that nice interaction also.